Hello, and welcome to my Final Fantasy series tier list video. Anyways, there's not a lot I need to say beforehand. Right off the bat, I just have it all sorted so you can see what games are being ranked, what ones I have not played at all, and the games I don't even plan on playing, at least as of now. Who knows, maybe one day I'll be like, I want to play Final Fantasy XII, Revenant Rings, and then play that, but at least as of now, I don't have any intent to play something like that, or the Vincent Final Fantasy VII game, or any of that. I will be going through these in the order that I played them originally. I think that's the easiest way to go through all these games onto the tier list. And pretty simple. 4 main categories, the Not For Me and Not Far Enough to Tell. That's for a game where I've started it, but I'm just not even close to far enough to be able to see where I'm going to rank it. I may talk about where I think it'll end up, but I'm not certain enough to actually rank it. Anyways, the first game up here is going to be Final Fantasy VII. Where am I going to put it? I'm going to put it back there. So, like many people, Final Fantasy VII was my entrance into the Final Fantasy franchise. I was really introduced to Final Fantasy when Sephiroth was at the Smash Bros. He was announced. I didn't really care because I never played Final Fantasy VII. And I was also just around that time, I was like, I want to play some Super Smash Bros. Just completely unrelated. And before he was actually properly added, there was the Sephiroth Challenge, where you could unlock him early. That popped up, and I was like, might as well do it. Beat it, won him, decided to play him a bit, and I was like, oh, wow, actually, I really like Sephiroth. He's one of my mains to this day, actually. So when that Christmas rolled around, I got eShop gift cards. I decided, I'm going to get Final Fantasy VII. And I've not been the same ever since. I'm going to put this on A tier. You may be wondering, why A tier and not S tier? I played this game before I was really used to playing RPGs that weren't Fire Emblem. This is before I started getting into the Xenoblade games. I'd pretty recently gone into Fire Emblem when I got this. This is 2019? 2020? I don't remember which, but it was certainly early. I still was so new to RPGs. So I wasn't a fan of turn-based combat. I tolerated it enough to get far enough in the game that I was like, okay, now I'm just going to turn on the cheats the first time I played it. I played it because I love the world and the characters so much. I've actually played this game more than any other game on this list. The first thing I did when I beat Final Fantasy Remake was replay the original Final Fantasy VII. And I recently replayed it. For an undisclosed reason that we'll get to soon enough, I started a quest to play through all the Final Fantasy games. And when I got to this one, I struggled. I struggled a lot until I got past Disc 1. And Disc 1 is where Remake and Rebirth all have their story stuff. So it wasn't until after I got to the stuff covered in Rebirth that I started to actually enjoy the game. And, that's my most recent playthrough. That was only a couple of months ago. So it sticks fresh. It's just, I don't know. I just don't enjoy this game that much anymore. I'd rather play the remakes than this game now. So that's why it's an A tier, not S tier. The soundtrack is one of my all-time favorites. I love the world. I love the stories. But I struggle to play it now. So I think it should go here. Next up is Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm just going to put things in the Not Far Enough to Tell until I actually, am ready to place them. That's what I'm going to do. But, Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is one of those games I actually wanted a PlayStation for. I never had a PlayStation growing up. It was this and Spider-Man. So when I finally got my PlayStation 5, this is the first game I bought, and the first one I started playing, I beat Spider-Man first, which is very telling. I absolutely adored Spider-Man, but I just didn't love Remake. Like I said, the first thing I did when I beat it was replay the original. Not because I wanted to see the rest of the story, but because I was actually disappointed. I didn't like the changes to the story, and, I still don't like all the multiverse, Wraith stuff, and I still think Sephiroth's presence is too high. But after replaying 7 again, and after playing Rebirth, my rose-tinted glasses are finally on, And I actually think this game's really good. I have yet to replay it, but I plan on replaying it when it releases on the Switch too, and if that's a bad port, I'll just replay it on PlayStation. But I'm going to replay it, and I'm really excited to replay it, because now that I'm more familiar with Rebirth, I actually think I'll be able to get into this game a lot more. I still think it is worse than 7. I think they just took too small a part of the game, and maybe even dragged it out a little too much. I remember the story pacing really bothered me just because of how much was added, but when I revisit it, I may now like that. Because when I most recently replayed 7, I did find myself wishing I was in Midgar more, because Midgar's always been my favorite part of 7. Ultimately, while I do, these days at least, wish it was turn-based combat. Combat's fun, all the mechanics are fun, I really like this game, it just feels so incomplete. But now with Rebirth out here, I'm sure once I replay this with Rebirth in mind, I'll enjoy it way, way, way more. Speaking of Rebirth, that's what's next. I do want to quickly mention that after Remake, I replayed 7, and that's when I actually bought 8 originally. But again, I just wasn't a general RPG guy yet. I just couldn't get into it, and there was other games I really wanted to play, so I was like, I'll come back to Final Fantasy 8. It's been years. I mentioned this, though, because 8 is the next game I plan on playing. Final Fantasy game I plan on playing. And again, just to emphasize, I wasn't a huge Final Fantasy guy at the time. I like Final Fantasy 7. I just struggled to get into the one other game I tried. And that was until Rebirth. I think the nicest thing I could say to Rebirth is that I left it wanting to become a Final Fantasy fan. Not just a Final Fantasy 7 fan. I left Rebirth wanting to play all the Final Fantasy games so that I could become a Final Fantasy fan. That is the reason why I started to play through all the games. That's how much I loved Rebirth. Taking just this overworld map from 7 and giving every ounce of the world so much love and detail was absolutely magical. I adored it. The story was a lot more true to the original. There was less focus on the multiverse stuff, and well, there was still some of that, particularly in the ending, which is probably the part of the game I'm most mixed on. It works a lot better here. It feels a lot more natural compared to Remake did to me. I loved seeing the world through this lens. I love seeing the characters through this lens. I used to hate Yuffie. I didn't play Intergrand with Remake because I didn't like Yuffie. And I was like, I won't enjoy this. I don't like Yuffie. But now, like, after Rebirth, she's one of my favorite characters from Final Fantasy VII. Genuinely, like, this was easily my game of the year 2024. I could not put the game down once I started it. It's one of the closest I've ever felt to playing Final Fantasy VII again for the first time. That's how much I loved playing Rebirth. And of course, Queen's Blood was also a ton of fun. And as you can guess now, this is where we go on to the original game. I am going to place it before I do most of my talking. I just want to quickly bring up the argument that sometimes I see with video games and movie franchises. Why are you ranking it low? If it weren't for X, you wouldn't have any of Y. I think that's a bad argument. Yes, without the first Final Fantasy game, we wouldn't have any of the others. But that doesn't mean it itself is going to be amazing. In fact, I see if you have a long-running franchise, the first one should be near the bottom, because if it isn't, that means you aren't growing and improving as you make more games. And I also want to say, yeah, I put it in C tier, but get your American school system brainwashing out of you. There's nothing wrong with C. If 5 and a 6 out of 10 are average, not a 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 is not average. 7 out of 10 is good. 5 and 6 out of 10 are average. And there's nothing wrong with average. A majority of the 8 billion people on this planet are ordinary, average, good folk. And that is what Final Fantasy, the original one, is, looking at it with the lens of someone born in the 21st century. It is, as far as all of gaming, from 1970s Pong to 2025, I think the original Final Fantasy belongs in average. When you look at it as a product of 1980s, if you look at it as a product of a time, I think it's actually a wonderful game. I think it's immaculate. The fact that it created all these systems that are still used in games today. One of the most popular games that's released in 2025 is Clair Obscur. And its level system is built a lot off of this game. Its combat is built a lot off of this game. This game's influence is still seen all throughout the RPG genre. This game was genre defining. But I just don't love playing it. I respect it immensely. And I thank it for its service. But at the end of the day, it hasn't always aged the best. With my standard RPGs, I do like story, especially on a first playthrough. On repeat playthroughs, I say this with Fire Emblem all the time. The story only to me truly matters on the first playthrough. The story is what I take away from the first playthrough. Now, if the gameplay is great enough, I will always forgive a bad story because I'll be able to keep coming back to the gameplay over and over again. Fire Emblem Engage is a horrible story, but I keep playing that game over and over again because I love the gameplay so much. But its first playthrough, I walked away being like, yeah, the story was not good. Maybe not as awful as some of the other Fire Emblem games, but not good. But also, much like with how I expect platformers not to have a good story, different types of games have different story expectations. Mario games, they're platformers. I don't expect a good story. Fire Emblem game, I care more about the gameplay. I don't expect a good story. But most other RPGs, story and gameplay go hand in hand. If I don't like the story or the gameplay, my opinion is going to go down. Unless I absolutely adore one aspect or the other. The original Final Fantasy VII, I didn't care for turn-based combat at the time, but I adored the story so much, I was able to forgive that. Here, there really isn't a story. The tiny little bits there are, I think, are cool, like the Chaos Shrine, Chaos, the Time Loop, all that stuff is cool. But also, there's very little story actively present throughout the game. There are no characters, no main characters. They're nameless warriors of light. I don't enjoy that. And just the gameplay in general, I like the combat. The combat's really fun. The world looks great, and it's a cool world, but I don't really enjoy traversing it because it's very guideless. It doesn't hold your hand. And call it a skill issue, but I don't like being lost in games. I've played through a couple of Metroid games. I've beaten Zero Mission. I've tried a couple of the others. I love the games and all, but I don't like being lost, so I struggle to play them. And obviously, when I play an old RPG, I expect I'm going to have a guide open, which made the first Final Fantasies all very tolerable and enjoyable experiences. But at the end of the day, the original Final Fantasy is not one that I plan to revisit the game itself on, unless I'm recording it anytime soon. Eventually, I'm sure I will. But if I play it in the next couple of years, it'll be because I'm recording it. The soundtrack's a classic. But that's like all Final Fantasy games, so I can't give too much credit for that. Again, C tier's wonderful, and it's the first game. It being near the bottom just means that the franchise went up from there, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. Now, obviously, the next game I played was definitely Final Fantasy V. I'm kidding, it was Final Fantasy II. One of the most astonishing things of the original Final Fantasy was that they got combat and the level system nearly perfected on their first go-around. So what did they do? They changed the level system and made it not good. Now, before I get to that, let's look at the rest of Final Fantasy II. There's a lot more of an in-depth story. The world has a lot more to explore, a lot more going on, and you have actual characters. Already a huge step up. And as much as I hate the password system, I think that's stupid. Everyone also always rags on this game for its level system. And it's stupid. But thankfully, I didn't play the original Super Famicom version of this game. I played the Pixel Remaster. And in the grand year 2024 when I played this, you can use cheating boosts to turn up the experience gain and all that, which makes the level system a lot more tolerable. We now have customization to make this game really fun, and while the level system isn't good, it's different, and they tried something, and I respect that so much. But the combat itself is the same, and the story and the world are better. I do enjoy it more than the first game. I think if I had to play the original versions of the first game or in the second game, I would prefer the original. But with Pixel Remaster and boosts and stuff like that, I actually think I prefer Final Fantasy II. So, at this point in my Final Fantasy journey, I had only beaten Rebirth a couple of weeks ago. I beat it at the end of March 2024, And I beat this game, the first Final Fantasy, like the second weekend of April. I only got it like the first week of April. Beat that 1 week later. So going into Final Fantasy 3, I was like, you know what? If I crank up all the boosts, can I beat this game in a day? Yes, I can. Final Fantasy 3 is easily my favorite of the NES trilogy. Why? Well, I think it has one of the most fun worlds to explore of the 2D Final Fantasies. I'd say I like its world exploration more than 1, more than 2, and more than one of the SNES games, actually. Yeah, I wish there were actual characters. That would be nice. Very nice, in fact. But there isn't, and there's nothing I can do to change that. I do, however, like the job system. Now, it's very primitive here, and of all the games with a proper job system, I think this is my least favorite. Because it's so unbalanced here. They very clearly want you to pick specific jobs for specific instances, but it is still a fun system. The world itself, the story's an improvement over 1 by far. In general, I just think this game is Final Fantasy 1, but way better. There's some weird moments, like having to go Mini or Toad for some of the dungeons, but this is a Final Fantasy game I'd go back to without recording. In fact, I plan on going back to it to play the DS version. I want to. Eventually I will. Which I think is why I put it above the other two. Now, still, lack of a proper story, lack of main characters, that keeps it down in C tier. But I do genuinely think that this is a huge improvement over its predecessors. Anyways, after Final Fantasy 3, I actually took a hiatus from playing the games. I briefly started 4. I didn't get past like the opening cutscene, as I just need a little break because I'd played all 3 of those in such close succession to one another, and I just didn't come back for way too long. This was until December 2024 when I was at Walmart and I saw Final Fantasy 16 on a huge sale, like $25. Checked Amazon, $20. Boom, I got that one next, and I played it next. So this is where I broke my sequential playing 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. And I think that was actually a good decision as well, just because it means I have more control over where I end. And Final Fantasy 16 is an interesting one. When I first played it, I absolutely adored it. Loved it. But the more Final Fantasy games I play after it, as well as just my thoughts leaving my Let's Play on it, my opinion has unfortunately gone down. I do still really, really, really like this game, but Let's Playing it so soon after beating it the first time really exposed all of its flaws to me. As, you know, the first time around, what really stuck with me was the characters. And I still think Final Fantasy 16 has some of my favorite characters of any Final Fantasy game. In fact, I'd argue Clive is probably still my favorite Final Fantasy main character. There's one other I really, really, really like, and we'll talk about them later, but Clive is probably my favorite still. I love the world itself, and while I think the plot gets a little messy in the home stretch, in the final quarter, the first half of the game, the story is home run after home run after home run. I love it the whole time, and that the second part of the game, first part of the second half is perfectly fine. It's really just that ending once all the countries have been dealt with and you really just have Ultima, that the game really starts to go downhill, I feel, pacing-wise, story-wise. It becomes so much less interesting, because what made the first half of the game so interesting was the way the Master Manipulator God stuff versus the human politics blended together. I think I both really like the more serious and mature tone, but I do think they almost went too high fantasy in a way. I loved not having the sci-fi stuff for once, no airships, none of that, but I think they took out all the fun parts of what they can still do. Is you can still have things like cactars appear, but I don't think they appear at all. All the fun fantasy enemies are just gone, and it really just almost takes itself too seriously. Because you can still have this more mature tone, I feel, with more levity and fun ideas and monsters. Nothing like the Monster House from 7 is here. Not even the hunts are very fun. They're very serious, down-to-earth fantasy monsters. I don't think down-to-earth fantasy monsters is an oxymoron, but if it is, I still think it applies. I think the biggest thing that hampers this game is its party system, or lack thereof. Because the problem is, this combat doesn't truly evolve. I enjoy the combat, but I get sick of it. I got sick of it by the end of the Let's Play, and even by the end of my casual playthrough, I was starting to get a little sick of it. Getting new icons isn't enough to keep the gameplay fresh. This combat's very similar to something like Xenoblade Chronicles, which I'm playing right now. But Xenoblade Chronicles keeps it more fresh. Not only do you earn more skills still like you do with Final Fantasy 16, there's more different levelings that you can do than Final Fantasy 16, where you can only really level things once, and then once you master it, you can just put it on anything. And different party members. Having different party members with different playstyles help keep things fresh. This game's combat in particular really reminds me at least of what I remember of Xenoblade 2's combat, with the different icons feeling like different blades. And the fact that you can switch between them and all that. But again, the different party members and the way higher variety of blades, blade combinations, chain attacks, all that make that game's combat still grow and evolve as you play through the game. Especially when you get party member and blade changes all the way through the late game. Xenoblade 2 keeps it way more fresh. And Xenoblade 3 then has its huge class and job system, as well as the fact that you can switch party members in combat, which is really handy, and keeps the combat fresh the entire game. Final Fantasy 16 doesn't have anything like that. It has great writing. I love the characters. It has great music. I love the world. I, in theory, enjoy the combat. But also the side quests are slog. There's too many of them, and they're the same place over and over and over again. And the actual worlds themselves, well, this game almost feels more like a platformer with its structure. You have one mission, then you have the next mission, then you have the next mission. You can even, replay missions for high scores. That's okay. Sure. And, of course, then you have the wide open areas that actually aren't wide open and are actually very linear. And I think that's just my main issue, is this game almost tries to hide its linearity, and it fails. Well, there's another linear game that I'm going to talk about, but it doesn't try to hide it. If I made this tier list 10 months ago, Final Fantasy 16 would have been S tier. It may have been in number 1, but instead I'm giving it, a respectable A tier. I still love this game, and this is the game that fully reinvigorated me on my Final Fantasy quest, and the only falter I've had since then is trying to replay Final Fantasy 7, which again, when I was doing that, I had the Final Fantasy 16 Let's Play, Final Fantasy 6 Let's Play, and another Final Fantasy game that I briefly tried in the middle. So it wasn't even a proper hiatus like from Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 16 was. Anyways, finally though, we're finally into Final Fantasy 4. I finally completed it less than 2 weeks after beating 16, and yeah, it's the best 2D game yet. Definitely, it's not even close. It is a whole tier above those, but I think this is one of the most overrated games in the franchise. Online, you see this as being hailed as one of the best ones, one of the best stories. Cecil's being one of the best main characters, one of the best redemption arcs in gaming, and I'm just sitting here like, what? His redemption arc was go to a village, being bullied, going through one dungeon, and then a combat. Now, obviously, this is an SNES game. They didn't have the full hardware capabilities to do all this text and cutscene to properly do a redemption arc, but to call it one of the best in gaming is, I don't think it's true. I think the world itself's less interesting than Final Fantasy 3's. I think the game itself is better, obviously, but I find the world itself a lot less interesting. You have a bunch of different world maps here, which is really cool, but ultimately only the first one has any significance. I enjoy the story for what it is. I like how absurd it gets, in a way, with where you're going and all the technology stuff. I think it's really fun, but I don't like the characters that much. I find the characters all very generic, and to me, one of the main issues is they wanted a bunch of different characters and jobs, but they hadn't really gotten a way to change out classes. So essentially, character joins, something happens if they're killed or injured or whatever, and that happens on repeat. And it's just I want some stability. I want the same characters. And even then, I didn't really care for a lot of the characters. Cecil's cool, but he really is nothing besides that Dark Knight being redeemed into a paladin. That's the end-all be-all with his character. Once you're done like the first third of the game, he doesn't really do anything to grow or evolve. Rydia's really cool. She's easily the highlight of the game, but even she actually has a character arc too. But like besides those, you got Cain, who annoys me. I'm on your side. I'm not on your side. I'm on your side. I'm not on your side. I'm on your side. I'm not on your side. And I don't care the reasons for that are. It kept happening over and over again. And I got sick of it by the end of the game. And I also do not like what they did with Golbez's character in the end of the game. I just don't think that worked. I don't think what they were trying to do with Golbez and Cecil worked at all for me. And that's just like, why? Why should I care about this? And I guess that's just what this whole story left me with, is that just is like, cool. I don't really care about this world that much, though. Which sucks, because the gameplay is a huge improvement over the first three. ATB, well, I have mixed feelings on that system after playing later games. I still think it's really fun system and a very fun evolution of turn-based combat. It's a much better change from the formula of the first game than the second game did. And the combat itself just feels really, really good all across the board. And it's a fun game. It is a really fun game. That's why it's in B tier. I just don't really care for its story or characters much. On the flip side, Final Fantasy V is easily one of the most underrated games in the entire franchise. Its story is obviously a lot more lighthearted and fun, but it still knows how to take itself seriously. It's still actually an enjoyable story. And quite frankly, I like the story more. I think the way they blend the different world maps and all that here is much more fun, because each world map actually has a lot to do in it. And I actually like the characters more. I could tell you more about the cast, the characters in 5 than I probably could a majority of 4. Now, obviously, a character like Rydia, I could probably say more on than any of the characters in 5. But like, what, Edward? Like, Edward from 4 is like the bard, that like the old magic guy whose name I can't remember. Tella, I think, actually. I guess I can remember. Hates because of his daughter. Like, yeah, cool. That's all I can tell you about them. But like, I like actually remember like all the stuff with Ferris and Lena and Galoof is great. Curie's great. Really, the character I can tell you the least about in 5 is, ironically enough, its main character, Bartz, who I don't really remember much of. But the other characters I could talk about a whole lot more. I love all the optional dungeons at the end. This game kind of does a thing where it's a mix between very linear and very open. The first 2/3 of the game are pretty linear, then it opens wide up for the end, which I think is really fun, with giving you a ton of optional stuff where you get to make your own story. I also think the job system here peaked. Of all the games I played with a expansive job system, 5 is my favorite, hands down. While I still think some of the balancing is a little off on the jobs, it felt way better than 3, and it was actually really fun, the balance between all the jobs, maxing all of them, so I could get kitted out units for the final boss, which I was able to decimate. Now, I genuinely think Final Fantasy V is phenomenal. It also has an incredible score. It is one of the best Final Fantasy soundtracks, period. Great game, great music, love the world, love the characters. This game made me smile, and I was having fun the entire time. Final Fantasy VI. Now, this video is actually being made as a tie-in to my Final Fantasy VI Let's Play, so I'm going to go pretty brief on this one. If you really want to know my full thoughts, watch the credits section of my Final Fantasy VI video. As during the credits, I fully talk about this game. This game means a lot to me now. I think it's beautiful. It's easily my favorite one, and I don't know if it'll stay that way, but at least right now, it's easily my favorite one. It kind of expands upon that idea of what I said with 5, where the first half is very linear, very story-driven, then the second half is what you make of it. And this is the first Final Fantasy game, though. I think the story is genuinely good. And, you know, it's an ensemble cast. And it's not, like, very, like, point A, point B, point... No. The story is really just about a bunch of people going through grief. A bunch of people that lost what they cared about or never had anything to begin with, and finding purpose in the world, both when the world is good and when the world is bad. This game is about finding purpose, and I think that's beautiful. I love all the mechanics of the game. I think Esper's might be a little broken, but I still think that is a fun way to do magic. I think it's much better than just buying magic at the shops. The music is obviously wonderful. I love the characters. Kefka's a phenomenal villain, as he's literally the antithesis of what the game's theme is. The game's theme is about finding purpose, and Kefka is a nihilist. He believes there is no purpose. Complete opposites. Absolutely wonderful game. I still think it's plenty fun, even now. Has some of my favorite dungeons as well of all the 2D games. This game just feels really good. Feels really good, and I'm a big fan of it. Final Fantasy 15. Now, one of my friends at work, he's a big 15 fan. It's the first Final Fantasy game he ever played. And if he ever finds this video, Maui, you should skip this section of the video. I'm gonna be mean to Final Fantasy 15. Now, not mean enough to put it at the bottom of the list. Gee, no. I had way more. I actually had a lot of fun with this game, but this game doesn't work. Not like it's buggy or anything. Thematically, story-wise, it just doesn't work. I see what they're trying to go for, but the open world goes against everything this game is trying to do. Because my core takeaway of this game from the second half of it is that we all have our destinies, we all have our fates, and there is no escaping it. It's not happy. It's dark, grimy stuff. It's not happy. Like, you're born for one role, you must fulfill it at no matter the cost. Yeah, no wonder Noctis is a little bit of a pain in the first half of the game. The problem is, I feel like the open world completely screws with the pacing and the tone of the story. The first half of the game, the story's moving so slow because of the open world. Then once you get past the open world, it's over it's over at the blink of an eye. It took less than one day moving on from the open world to beat the game. And this is when I was at school and had classes to go to as well. And the open world has this just really fun vibe and atmosphere, and it's just like, this goes against everything else in this game. And the fact that you need like movies to fully understand it, yeah, that's the problem. The combat is fun, but it's not amazing. It's not very deep, obviously, and combat doesn't need to be deep. But just like 16, it gets repetitive. And thankfully, you have different party members, but I still think it's rough. And while there's a lot more I can say of Final Fantasy 15, I just want to leave it at that. It just doesn't feel finished. It's just, this isn't the game that they wanted to make. It's very clear that they wanted to make a different game than this, but they were held back from making it. Like, the canceled DLC, for instance. Like, I think being able to play that and seeing the true ending of this world would actually turn my mind around. But alas, that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where Final Fantasy 15 is okay. Also, none of the women characters come back in the final chapter, which is really weird. Anyways, this is technically where my quote-unquote hiatus begun. After that, I went to replay Final Fantasy 7. But in addition to my Let's Plays, there's one other game I tried. Final Fantasy 11. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this one. Nah, I'm just gonna move it right away. This one just did not seem for me. And you know, I eventually want to give this game another try. I initially, me and Ethan, we did a month free trial, and it just didn't really click with us very much. Definitely not enough to pay for it. And I do eventually want to go back, either with Ethan or without him. I want to go back and I want to play it fully. But also, I just found it hard to play. And I hate to be that kind of guy of like, oh, quality of life's not there, so I can't play. I mean, I play plenty of old games. Like, the old Fire Emblem games are atrociously lacking of quality of life. Even some of the modern games are lacking quality of life that they need, to be completely honest. It's just for a big MMO that you're expected to spend hundreds of hours in, the menus. I hate to be like, the menus are bad, therefore game bad, but like, the menus are why I couldn't get into the game. It made it hard to play. Also, I found the combat, at least that kind of combat with only one person you could control, boring. Story didn't hook me in, and obviously, like, it's an MMO, the story pace is going to be very different, but this game did not draw me in like I wanted it to. And before you're like, well, of course, there's from 2001, of course the UI is going to suck. Yeah? I grew up playing Toontown Online, which released in 2002 and 2003. And that game's UI was so easy to understand. Yeah, very different games. Toontown's a much smaller game, but still, it's an MMO with great UI. Great UI, and obviously it had to be because there's an all-ages, mainly kid-oriented game. It had to have a good UI. But UI makes all the difference. I was able to play that game and understand that game as a 4-year-old, as a 3-year-old, and as a 22-year-old, I struggled to get into Final Fantasy 11. I don't know, society or something. Final Fantasy 10. Yeah, I'll place it before I talk about it. It's good. It's really, really good. Mostly because of its combat, its story, and its characters. I'll get into the rest of the gameplay, but that's where my main complaints from the game come from. The story's great. It reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy 15, except without tonal issues. Because in a way, they're actually very similar story-wise. I'm not going to go into spoilers too much, but Tidus and Noctis, to me, feel very, very similar. The difference is, the game is paced well, it's totally consistent, and Tidus is one of the best main characters from any Final Fantasy game. I'd say second behind Clive. I love a good audience surrogate, and he works really well. He knows nothing of what's going on, and seeing the world through him is great. It works really well. The story here is one of the most emotional ones in Final Fantasy, because so much of it is driven by emotion. I'd argue it's a game about sacrifice, and what lengths you're willing to go to make the world a better place. Something that I'm sure everyone at some point thinks about, like, can I make the world a better place? And this game is essentially about that. The world itself is so immersive, in large part thanks to the characters and how they interact with it, as well as the music. For a PlayStation 2 game, this is absolutely incredible. The story moved me. I was so invested in Yuna and Tidus and the rest of the gang. I really wanted what was best for them. The sphere grid system is also a really fun change of pace level up wise. Now, I played with the default setting, and I hope that the more advanced sphere grid is a lot less linear, as I could see myself in a replay playthrough not enjoying the game nearly as much if the sphere grid is linear, even on the advanced mode. But it's just really fun to be able to actually control what level ups people are getting, be able to put them in different places, have people learn different things. That's awesome. My main complaint with this game is its linearity. It is essentially a hallway simulator, and that's a complaint I typically see levied against 13, but I had seen it against this game too. And, based on this game, if 13's biggest issue is that's a hallway simulator, I think I'll love the game. Because I absolutely adore 10. Because it doesn't try to pretend it's not ultra linear. There's a couple of moments where you have to backtrack, and that's annoying and all. It is what it is. The world is still so fun to explore. I also love how it deviates from the formula a little bit. It does something different. Because one of the first things I noticed when I played 16 was there's no explorable overworld. There's no prelude on the title screen. And I started to wonder what game started these changes? Where did these disappear? And now, who knows? I haven't played 8 and 9, so maybe they are the culprits of this, but there's no prelude in 10. And I'm pretty sure 10 is also the first game not to, use an overworld map to explore the world. So 10 really is the shift into the modern era. And for what it does, I think it does a great job of it. It tries to do something different while still feeling like Final Fantasy, and it succeeds. It's great. And some of its late game side quests are absolutely bullcrap. Like Chocobo Race. Yeah, that's bullcrap. Also, the combat here is phenomenal. This is the best combat of any turn-based Final Fantasy. Correction, this is probably the best combat of any Final Fantasy. The switching in and out party members are so much fun. I just wish you got XP on the members that weren't in the field at the time, but whatever. Being able to switch them in and out is great. It incentivizes you using all of them, using all the characters' strengths for your advantage. Keeps the gameplay fresh. Oh yeah. Combat rocks. And it's one of the reasons why this game is so high, despite its linearity. After Final Fantasy X, I obviously played Dissidia. That was obviously my. I can't even find. I didn't realize I had to scroll all the way down. I can't even do the joke properly. Damn. But no, I played X2 next. What I knew about X2 going in was its reputation. I knew the reputation of 6 and 10 going in, and I had high expectations. And I was worried that they wouldn't match my expectations. But they did match my expectations. Much like Final Fantasy VII and 7 Rebirth, those games gave me a feeling from the very early moments that this was going to be special. And 10 too? Yeah, it was fine. It was fine. It's not a bad game. It's not necessarily what I wanted, but also at the same time, like, when you're judging art, you got to keep your expectations out of it. You got to judge a piece of media and art based on what it is, not what you wanted it to be. And obviously, I wanted Final Fantasy X-2 to be Final Fantasy X-2. But no, they changed things up. I think the job system here with the dress spheres is actually one of the better instances of it, if only it was balanced well. My issue is I don't like the combat as much. I think this is the worst version of the ATB. I found myself consistently frustrated at how long certain actions actually took to go into effect once I selected them, and that caused me to lose a lot. I don't like the story pacing here. It felt very rushed. I see what they were trying to go for, and I like how unlinear this game is, especially compared to 10. That was really great. But the story pacing was, to me, all over the place, and it was really like, can we pick a lane and focus on it? What is this game actually about? Is it about the world post Final Fantasy X, or is it about Tidus? Please pick a lane and stay in it. And then there's the good ending. I love the good ending. I picked it, but also, I feel like the good ending goes against everything this game is trying to do. Because this game is about Yuna and her life. So backtracking that for a good ending, I think was a mistake, as much as I personally love that ending. As a whole, 10-2 is a game I really, really liked. It has a great soundtrack, but I was a lot more frustrated than I wanted to be while playing it. And yeah, sure, a little bit of that was a skill issue. But this really does feel like they designed this game with multiple playthroughs in mind. They're like, yeah, to get the full experience, you need to like play it all multiple times. And I just don't really want to do that. I just don't feel like I was given incentive enough to come back and play it again. It goes in the B tier. I do still think I would rather revisit it than 4. If I revisit 4, it'll be for the Let's Play. It'll be for a Let's Play. Or 10-2 at least still has a world I love and with some characters I really like. Final Fantasy 12. Where do I begin with Final Fantasy 12? This is a complicated game. This is the mainline game I most recently beat for the first time. And I really liked it, except for when I didn't like it. You know, there's this meme that people post around with video games a lot. I see it particularly a lot in like the Sims community of me thinking about playing a game, happy face. Me actually playing game, frowny face. For the first third of my playtime of this game, I was the opposite. I was struggling to pick it up, but once I picked it up, I was having so much fun. My main issue that I struggled with this game with consistently was I just was not enjoying the combat. I found it boring and slow. And then I realized, wait, this combat really isn't that different from Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, huh? And I actually enjoyed the combat there. Is this just a skill issue? And therefore, I got skill issued. And once I realized I was having a skill issue, I started enjoying the game a whole lot more. Who'd have thunked? Once I realized it's my fault, not the game's fault, I liked it more. I still think 7 Remake and Rebirth do the combat better, but once I got better understanding how to properly use gambits and all that, I had a lot more fun. I still think turn-based combat would be better, and I think combat's the main weak link with this game, but this is a good game. I love its world, I love its areas, I found its story engaging, and I really liked its characters. Now, I've seen online the debate on whether, like, Vaughn should be the main character or not, and when I first beat the game, I was like, yeah, I think this game would be better if Balthier or Ash were the main character, but then I thought about it more, and I was like, no. One of the things that makes this story so different and works so well is Vaughn's just a guy. The reason why the story works so well is that he really doesn't have any direct stakes. He's just a guy who's fighting for his homeland, and you know what? I actually really like that. And I think this game's narrative is its strongest spot. I think, just like Final Fantasy IV, I don't like what they were trying to do with Galbranth at the end with, like, a redemption and all that. But, good game. Good story. I enjoyed it a lot. It goes in A tier. I don't think it's redefining the Final Fantasy game franchise at all, but essentially, to me, this is what I wanted 11 to be. It plays like 11 with quality of life enhancements. And this just goes to show, if I actually really try 11, I think I'll love it, but I don't know. I struggled. Anyways, we have 2 options to go down. One of these games I haven't beaten yet. And that's actually the game I started playing after 12. So we're going to actually break sequence and talk about the game I most recently completed, Final Fantasy Tactics. In particular, the remake, the Ivalice Chronicles, but it's not on here. So I'm using the original as the icon for it. But I played the remake. You know what I said about not letting your expectations get in the way? I'm going to try my best. I'm a huge Fire Emblem guy. And I knew, obviously, that this was not going to be like a Fire Emblem game. People online everywhere in Fire Emblem subreddit, Final Fantasy subreddit, Twitter, YouTube, all everywhere said, oh yeah, they're very, very different, and they are. I wasn't expecting a Fire Emblem game going into this, but I was expecting a game that I'd love. Final Fantasy is my favorite video game franchise. I love the games. I love the gameplay. So I went into this being like, yeah, even if it's not like Fire Emblem, it's still a tactical RPG. I'm going to absolutely adore this game. This just in, I did not absolutely adore the game. In fact, I borderline, part of me wonders if I don't like it at all. A part of me thinks I don't like it. And I'm going to say right now, a lot of what I'm about to complain about, gameplay-wise, is definitely going to be a skill issue. I found the flow of balance disorienting and didn't make sense. I played on the lowest difficulty because I intended to come back and play on higher difficulties more often, but I'd have a bunch of normal fights, pretty easy, no struggles, then all of a sudden I'd have a map that I just, even on the lowest difficulty, I struggled on so much, and then the next map after it, easy. And I'm just like, what? I'm only on the lowest difficulty. Why am I getting steamrolled and essentially stopped dead on my track with some of these Lucario fights? Like, all the infamous fights here were horrible. And there was just so many boss fights here I just wanted to stop playing the game during. Which is all the more ironic because the final boss was pathetically easy. What? And that's, I guess, just my biggest complaint of this game. I just did not like the difficulty flow and ebb. It didn't feel like it kept growing and growing and growing in difficulty. It felt like it was consistent with major spikes out of nowhere that go back down afterwards. And I just find that frustrating to no end. And I also just wasn't a huge fan of the story. I like the characters, but there's only... But the problem is this game made me side with nobles for some reason. Because every way and place, everyone looked down upon Ramza just because he had noble blood. And, like, it just got to a point of, like, I get this game's trying to... Its theme is, like, actions speak louder than words. But typically, like, I've always sided with the commoners, but they were just so annoying. I hate you just because you're noble. I don't care that you're trying to fight for our cause. I hate you because of... Well, come on. I just found this game annoying to get through. And now I'm absolutely positive if I were to play this game again, I'd like it way more. But when I see people calling it one of their favorite Final Fantasy games, I'm just like, I wish I could see what you see in the game. I'm sure I'll eventually play it again, and I'm sure I'll like it more. But, like, I'm right on the edge here. On the picture that I did for reference, of which I just so I know where I'm placing everything that I did beforehand, I put it here, but, like, at the end of the day, there are more moments I had fun with than ones I didn't. So I am going to put it in B tier. Its job system is what I wish Fire Emblem Three Houses was. I obviously prefer, at least with Fire Emblem, a lot more linear class lines. But at least here, there's quality over quantity. There wasn't a ton of jobs. There was a lot, and you had a lot of customizability. But I also feel like they were more direct and easy to feel benefits from doing certain classes and doing certain ways in a way you were able to bring one thing over from other classes to whatever you go to. I think this class system is just Three Houses, but way better. It actually made me enjoy a non-linear class system. So I gotta give props to that. And I did like the characters. I liked the ending. I thought the ending was great as well, so I do think it deserves B tier. But, I'm in thin ice. My relationship with that game is not very good. Which finally brings us to Final Fantasy XIV, which I'm not going to talk much on because I'm still in the starter town. I'm playing with my dad, and in theory, next time we play, we'll hopefully be leaving the starter town. If it... the story's the weak link. I just don't care about the story yet, but the combat's a ton of fun. The world itself is great. And, you know, if it keeps what it's doing up, I think it'll easily make it to A tier. Right now, if I had to rank it, I'd probably put it B tier just because the story's not grabbing me at all, but You know? I believe that it'll keep going up, up, up. And I want it to keep going up, up, up. Anyways, yeah. Final Fantasy. I'm really excited to see where I go from here. I know the games I definitely plan on playing, and the order is going to be most likely either 8 or Strangers in Paradise next, and then the 13 trilogy, then 9, and that's where my core Final Fantasy journey ends. With those 6, and eventually, before Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, I'll definitely play the Crisis Core games. Maybe even before then if I really want to, especially if I see them on a good sale. Eventually, I'll probably play Final Fantasy IV the after years. I want to see what the whole deal is about it, especially because people don't like it, but I want to give that world another shot. Maybe I'll actually really like Final Fantasy IV's world after that. And I do want to play the other Tactics games. Eventually. Because I genuinely think all my issues with Tactics 1 were skill issues. Because like I said with 12, once I got past my skill issues, I started enjoying the game so much more, and I just never really got to that place as well as with Tactics. And I do think that if I get past that place in Tactics, I will love the game. So I want to try the other games still. Anyways, yeah. Final Fantasy rules. Time to go play another RPG franchise instead.